In my most recent video, I discussed the idea of Itachi Uchiha betraying the Akatsuki, as in, what if Obito did break the pact and Itachi was forced to hunt the Akatsuki members and slay them whilst leaking intel? Could the Akatsuki put him down? And while I think a narrative for that video and concept was very grounded, I suppose I overlooked another member who could actually betray the Akatsuki, but in a different manner, and this being Kisame. Kisame is a character bound by loyalty built through hardships, such as his loyalty to Obito, whom he believed was Madara, who also commanded Kisame to slaughter his entire platoon and murder his own master for Samehada. So here, since many people have claimed I downplay Kisame, I want to reconcile that by giving him his own video on a topic I haven't actually seen before, with him running each Akatsuki tier like I had Itachi doing in the last one, going from like the low tier members, then to the low middle, then high middle, and then to the peak of the Akatsuki. But yeah, I suppose we might want to begin with this section of Kisame and just how strong he actually is. And Kisame's power growth is undoubtedly one of the best in the entire series, even if you just discuss his growth over the time skip, which is crucial, as many people will point to Kisame being fearful of Jiraiya and his reputation, which shouldn't be underestimated, as it's exactly that, his reputation, which Kisame is simply comparing it to his own 7 ninja swordsman reputation, which is far inferior, as Jiraiya's reputation is even noted by Obito to give Pain a run for his money, keeping his hands full. With this being a Sage Mode Jiraiya, so considering its reputation, let's not run with either this or the fact that Kisame lost to base guy and was equaled by Kakashi, whom are both Konoha's top jonin. Yet after the time skip, with nearly 2 years of training and absorbing more chakra, Kisame then is noted by Pain to have the largest amount of chakra in the entire Akatsuki, with him actually splitting his chakra up using only 30%, and is still noted by Neji to have the most amount of chakra ever except for Naruto, with this Kisame actually being more than capable of overpowering a base might guy, as well as using multiple clones to beat up Neji, a jonin, and the rest of the squad, with him just showing previously that guy was a blitz level above him in base, and now just a 30% clone, whilst expending several jutsu, can still overpower guy in taijutsu, forcing him to actually open the 6th gate instantly, just showing the potential exponential increase in overall ability that Kisame actually gained, which gets furthered even more in his final death match against a much stronger 6th gate guy. And for those who are skeptical, is guy actually stronger? Well, we're made aware in the 3rd data book, and there's actually an extreme interest ranking in which Might Guy is listed to have the most dedicated extreme interest ever, of course being like his sidestepping and training and whatever, with the 1 decade 100 ninja guide also stating how Kakashi trains every single day, which guy has to just keep up with. And that guide also only goes up to chapter 456, but we could still infer it does go on, or at least they both still get stronger via fighting, and yet Kisame is then a rival to that 6th gate guy, being arguably superior. This is really impressive, as we actually have no clue if Kisame is close to full power or not. When he initially exits Samehada, he's actually extremely frail, and then begins to take some of Samehada's chakra, and they're actually virtually the same flavor, so it's basically his own chakra, and then gets stopped short with Aoba then firing kunai prongs into his arm to attempt to stun him, which was actually pretty convenient for Kisame, as he just absorbed that chakra, but that's about it. So we don't really know if he absorbed his Bijou amounts of chakra right there, or he did at least take enough to have B dropping dead on the floor, but he was also training with Naruto. So this could show a testament to his reserves and whatnot, yet he was still able to casually tank and react to a kick from base guy, to which he then just uses a shark bomb to overpower, which, yes, the shark bomb is actually very versatile. We'll come back to that, as it's like in a really small form here, which is pretty cool. And it will actually be this single jutsu overpowering guy that instantly had him entering the 6th gate, with him landing behind Kisame, and then Kisame remarking about his persistence, and then hits him with a nigh undetectable chakra bullets that are used for 1000 hungry sharks as they try to swim toward him, which actually creates a tsunami due to guy not moving, meaning that they actually have many other great applications. And the 10-year anniversary guide also just supports this, and how they fire these chakra bullets, and then the sharks just kind of chase them with their hungry nature. But again, we'll get into that later. But even with his 6th gate of Sakujaku, he still couldn't overpower the sharks, and enters the 7th gate, one short of the 8th gate, one that creates an aura so strong it pushes aside the water, making him able to actually move more freely in a less dense median. Yet Kisame still reacts equally to Guy, and only loses this clash due to the Hirudora's power actually not, having chakra, and it's just being a chakraless form, which just goes straight through the shark bomb. And also, no, saying this shark bomb is then above Madara Susanoo is not applicable, or at least if it is, it's very shaky, so I just don't agree with it. This obviously not being a full power Kisame, as we do know he couldn't actually fuse with Samehada, and he will have the Akatsuki here as well, and whatnot. So whether you think he's at full power in base is semi-irrelevant, as we do know that, against the Akatsuki, he will, be at full power and does still have access to this fused form that he used against the Perfect Jinchuriki 8 Tails Killer B that he kind of just popped into instantly, with this form actually being more implied to have no weaknesses according to the chapter synopsis statement, with this being what he actually used to concretely place himself above the peak V2 Killer B regardless of the octopus advantages. So this is pretty interesting, since we just know that V1B is able to combo with V1A, just meaning that even if a fighter like that, was in the bubble, it would still just be over due to Kisame's advantages. And this isn't really, inconsistent, as Suigetsu could react to V1A, who Kisame is just above via Taka Sasuke telling Suigetsu to yield, as he isn't strong enough to fight Kisame, with Kisame also just parrying off Suigetsu in the anime, not finding him to be all that impressive. So this shouldn't really be that inconsistent, as Kisame being relative to being base gets somewhat questionable though, considering we do have statements for both of them actually holding back and both of them wanting to kill, with Kisame also just being able to pick up on B's plans, such as him testing Kisame's reaction patterns with the Raiton pencil, which also can't really be backskilled to be, in part to things like wind and air drag and bullet drop, but things like this, his charge in V1 where Kisame is actually able to put his foot up prior to be hitting him, it kind of showcases that he can still react on these low ends, just maybe not at like his peak speed, which is still pretty impressive. And no, this doesn't get Kisame to KC of 1. Don't know where this comes from. Well, actually, I do. B's entire personality is training and honing his skills to honor his older brother's words, with that being exactly what B was actually doing on the first page he's ever shown him, which is pretty consistent, as we actually know he's constantly training and getting stronger via fighting. So no, the B in the war arc is just stronger than the B here, which is supported by the Konoha 100 Leaves section, mentioning how the title of A is only given to the strongest in the village, just supporting that A is stronger than B. So yeah, Kisame is pretty crazy, and does have a lot of other talking points, like ones we'll bring up against Orochimaru with his fuse form, but the other ones will just be brought up as needed. So let's just begin with what the tiers are, and the low tier is Hidan, Kakuzu, and Konan. The lower mid tier is Sasori and Deidara, then the high middle tier just being Orochimaru, and then after that we can just have Kisame taking on Itachi and Pain individually, as those shouldn't really be too contentious in my opinion. So yeah, I guess before we get started with the low tiers, I wanted to please ask you guys, if you actually do enjoy what you hear, maybe you've heard me before, then hit that damn subscribe button. Like, bro, it's free and helps me out a ton, and also feel free to like the video. But anyway, on to the low tier. Now, for the low tier, I actually think they have a really good stylistic matchup for Kisame, or at least a lot better than Itachi, and this is consistent as well, considering a few aspects, most of which from the strongest one being Kakuzu. I mean, he tanked a mountain falling on him in the novel, whose masks are literally described to be very nasty by Ino, so maybe Kisame wouldn't even want to absorb him, or at least Samehada wouldn't want, and would just kind of, he'd be more forced to fight him in like an actual confrontation, which shouldn't really be a problem, considering the caliber difference here. But the other disadvantage would just be Kakuzu's main element is countered by lightning, which is also just the one nature that Kisame doesn't have. So does this matter? And to be honest, probably not. As mentioned earlier, we know that Kakashi trains and actually hones his skills every single day, as well as he actually got stronger from this fight due to the Kisame versus Guy match, due to his Raikiri amount increasing several times over, and he actually gains enough control to utilize Kamui without instantly being bedridden, showing a testament to his growth. And this would be rather important, as Might Guy and Kakashi are obviously very relative in base, with Kakashi's peak speed being his Sharingan and Raikiri, with Guy being able to match that with his 6th gate. So here's Kisame matching this guy in speed and being faster, even showing relativity to a 7th gate guy whose attacks are said by himself to not even be close to his previous 6th gate ones. So this drain Kisame would obviously just be greater, at least very close to a Sharingan Raikiri Kakashi, which has actually been training for over 200 chapters and has fought many opponents since then, such as Pain and Sasuke. So no matter what route you really take, this Kisame is certainly above Kakuzu in physical stats, since Kakashi was able to actually react to him in the taijutsu scuffles, with the anime actually portraying them as equals, with this Kakashi in the manga still being able to react to him, such as like his specialty ninjutsu, such as the false darkness, and never actually really being pressured enough to even whip out Kamui. So this certainly actually paints a case that Kisame is stronger than their strongest member, and this does follow with Kisame not really noting anything when he heard Kakuzu and Hidan died, whereas he did with Deidara, noting his power, yet not with Kakuzu's, just probably implying that Kakuzu, or Kisame, sorry, never really viewed him as much. And we know that typical Jonin are capable of catching Kakuzu off guard via syrup traps and crow diversions, and we also know this that by this point in the series, Kisame is not only a master of taking on multiple opponents at once, as shown against Team Guy, Jonin, whom he was just overwhelming with only 30% of his power, and is also likely just approaching or already entering that Sannin tier of power, as made evident by both Kisame and Orochimaru scaling in relation to Itachi, which I'll get into later, which is rather interesting considering how base Jiraiya is chosen to be Hokage over Kakashi twice, with Kakashi still implying Jiraiya is stronger in the Pain arc, and this could be Sage Mode, but, you know, Jiraiya is also just beating up base Naruto right after this fight, according to the Storm Games, just for some supplementary stuff. So if it isn't clear, Kisame is just vastly above each of these fighters individually, and no, Konan doesn't really approach the Sannin tier, and this is made evident by like her best showings coming from the Obito fight, in which he noted things like he didn't want to hurt a comrade, and was just plain out underestimating her. And bro, she also had 600 billion paper bombs filling the entire ocean. So I'd be like, come on, we can't stick with this. So her only real showings come from her bout with Jiraiya, in which she was just questionably up to fight, you know, and he dealt with her rather easily in base with his toad oil. So considering Hidan also notes his inferiority to Kakuzu via stating how Kakuzu is usually the doer in Jinchuriki capture, as well as him actually playing off Kakuzu being the leader in their duo, such as him not really having a clue what to do against the shadow paralysis, and he then screams for Kakuzu to help and do something. So I mean, okay, if it isn't clear, Kisame is just a total step above all three and has several methods of putting them down. The first of which is one he actually does in character, would be his exploding water shockwave, a jutsu quite literally meant for multiple opponents, which is essentially just a large amount of water, an amount actually able to turn a barren wasteland to a violent ocean, according to some translations. That sole purpose is literally just to offset the balance of the opponent, which gives him the topography advantage, with him actually being able to either beat them up with his power that rivals base Kakashi, and hence Kakashi with just 30% of his chakra, or simply just absorb, you know, their chakra until they are actually completely drained, which actually makes this fight much tougher as well. And while Kisame's objective is to slay them all, they also have to put him down. So if he plays defense, he can also just, you know, he's way too fast for them to even catch, and has the best stamina and chakra reserves in the entire Akatsuki. This means that his reserves are greater than even Pain, as noted by himself, who quite literally bombed the entire Leaf Village, fought hundreds, beat all the top dogs, and beat Sage Naruto, and then went on to battle Six Tails and even use a Chubaku Tensei. Yet Kisame has more chakra, as noted by Pain, and the statements of his chakra being on par with full-on Bijou, according to not only Chodro, but the data book as well, referencing his fuse form, making him like a tailed beast. And hell, even the chapter synopsis says that he's the Akatsuki's monster, not Kakuzu or anyone else. So while Kakuzu's showings against Yugito are actually pretty impressive by some standards, you know, same with Hidan as well, as he actually did evade the Master Fireball, Kisame is still just, he's an entire tail beast on his own, and not only fought the strongest Jinchuriki aside from Naruto and won, but also packed up the Four Tails Jinchuriki Roshi. So by all means, Kisame is, his winning points here are just ridiculous. And if worse comes to worse, if he does play the offense game, which he could just use like the Shark Bomb on all of them and then just beat them up and absorb their chakra, with him just being demonstrably stronger in base, much less when fused with with Samehada, which he can virtually just do instantly at any time, which just makes him faster and stronger, with each chapter synopsis talking about how it's a form with practically no weaknesses. So covered with the water bubble, nothing in their arsenals are stopping him, not even like Kakuzu's Jiangu form, which is still, you know, much faster. It was still beaten by like base Naruto, who again Kisame is massively above, meaning that Kisame successfully clears the low tiers. And by all means, if you think Hidan can pull the ritual off, then let me know how he would possibly do that. Okay, alright, I know, believe it or not, the zombie duo is arguably my favorite duo, but Kisame just beats them up pretty bad. You know, also, bro, before we move on to the most interesting section, or one of the most, why aren't you subbed? Like, what are you doing? Anyway, following that, we have the artistic duo, two very formidable foes of the Akatsuki, and I think similar to Itachi, Sasori has a much better matchup than Deidara, despite being weaker, and I've talked about this many times. I don't really want to regurgitate the same argument to keep the videos fresh and whatnot, and not repetitive, so by all means, check out the Itachi version where I do talk about, a few different things that I won't really bring up as much here, but I suppose like a solid Spark Notes run through would just be like how the one statement of Sasori being stronger is Deidara just trying to get Kakashi off his back due to him either wanting an easier fight against Naruto alone, and we just know that while this does presuppose Deidara cares about his own self-interest, this is an old argument I found myself disagreeing with, and as we know, the reason why is because he actually does care about it in relation to Kakashi, but since we know the bombs he used to one-shot the Three Tails was a C2 fish, he probably just wants to do that with Kurama, but would just one-shot Naruto if he did that. So he's simply taking pride in the capture of Gaara, and is also just using this to draw out Kurama's power to not one-shot Naruto. So coupling this with Deidara fighting the strongest Team 7 member, at least potentially excluding Kakashi, being Sasuke, who could actually perception with both Naruto and Sakura and could keep up with Sasori, this would be the same Sasuke that Deidara was actually able to react to. And yes, Deidara is pretty strong, being able to make up for the combat speed disparity with Sasuke via using his bomb's explosive velocities and area of effect with his own distance made by his flight. And we know that like Deidara's raw combat speed is just below Sasuke's. However, it should still be noted that things like his flight speed would have actually been able to keep up on the basis that Akatsuki could react to his explosive velocities point blank from one of the fastest birds, as shown here, yet was having trouble even perceiving his flight speed against Inoki, just alluding to how fast Deidara actually is and how he could have been fighting much better if he wasn't so hot-headed against a Sharingan user like Sasuke. To potentially even, trying to use his eye goggle or him just using the face attaching birds, which would have given him much more of an advantage, and to a fight already considered to be extreme in difficulty according to the third data book that mentions how in his final work of art he truly surpassed Sasuke, with of course the C0, which obviously, I mean, yeah, it's going to kill Kisame if that goes off as well. Another strategy, what would actually be, is Deidara just using his hiding mole jutsu to then plant bombs under the ground that Kisame couldn't really counter due to his lack of lightning style ninjutsu. However, he could actually just use his underground swim to either then slice Deidara up from the surface or then just actually absorb all the chakra from the bombs he puts down there to then just amp himself more, or just both at the same time, as Kisame can absorb chakra without Samehada. Now, I'm going to be honest. Going into this fight, Kisame clearly has the advantage over both Deidara and Sasori in terms of just raw stats, as that shouldn't really be controversial. I mean, he could literally spar with a more serious 3-Tomoe Itachi than Heavy Sasuke ever did, according to the games, with Kisame also just matching a Hirodora that engulfed the entire Turtle Island that took a C2 combined with Manda 2 to even flip. So things like, the water shark bomb, that could just clash and absorb the chakra from the Hirodora, could also just do the same from like a C2 or C3, with it even being debatable if C3 could get through. And while it is the pinnacle of all explosion style ninjutsu, Kisame's shark bomb functions on the basis that the stronger the attack, the stronger his bomb if it has chakra, and we know something like C3 chakra is what's implemented into the clay. So he can low-key just absorb them all with this large, a really large shark bomb. However, another variant of the shark bomb, being the miniature one that actually overpowered base guy and made him want to enter the 6th gate, could come into play here and just absorb the chakra out of the clay prior to detonation, like when he pulls it out of his left hand. And this is all, this also just gives Kisame more chakra, and this just allows him to absorb more chakra with either Samehada or just his basic absorption, making this fight progressively harder for Deidara and Sasori, with it being questionable of how Sasori could ever even interact with Kisame, as I think this is pretty interesting. And while I think Sasori is pretty impressive, he's weaker than Deidara, with his sand being a little more versatile, due to its poison, making it much more risky for Kisame to ever enter in super close proximity and attempt to actually absorb the chakra from the sand, or just snatch the puppet up with its strings and whatnot and just absorb those. But the speed disparity laid out could, it could be a big problem, and a long distance game is probably the best move for someone like Deidara. And he does have, I guess Kisame does have two main jutsu for this, right? First being the water shockwave earlier, just to keep Sasori off balance and push him away to focus on the larger threat of Deidara. However, that's all he could really do with these, as they could shred his body or his puppets, but Sasori can neither be drowned nor broken, and he can actually just piece himself back together, presumably regardless of the damage, and this could be done through just the chakra lining all the parts and being controlled by the main unit, the core. So Kisame might actually be able to absorb that chakra or just straight up the core chakra, but again, he's mainly just going to be using the water style and only really engaging in a counter once this is much less risky for him. Also, one thing I've heard many times is how Kisame actually could counter poison in the Akatsuki novel. However, even though the translations for this are questionable, the context for that is that they were merely poisonous bees that actually sting twice, and upon the second sting, the poison is then deeply injected, and Kisame was stung once, and to avoid getting stung again, Itachi basically was like, A, hide in your water prison, in which he just does, and then the bees drown before they actually get to him. So no, Kisame doesn't really have any counters to poison, and shows very much wariness of it in this very novel. So just to be honest, I think Kisame does get around the poison, and for a few different reasons. First being that, since this is a full power Kisame, as he's getting a full refresh each round, the 1000 Hungry Shark Jutsu, the Shark Bomb, and the Water Bubble are all three an attack that would outright overpower and probably put down anything Sasori has. For example, right? The 1000 Hungry Shark Jutsu that create a tsunami against 6-gate guy is actually much more versatile, as in the attack works via actually implanting invisible chakra bullets onto the target or dumplings onto the target, and then the sharks merely come for it being hungry. So the bullets theoretically could actually just be planted on Sasori's core or just any part of his body, or even the third Kazekage puppet, which was one shot by Sakura. So considering these overpowered a 6th gate Asakujaku, Kisame is at least slaughtering whatever the bullets go to. Then he also just has the ability to do it once again, or whatever else considering his reserves. And yes, this attack would also work on Deidara. Deidara does very well when his opponent can't reach him, obviously, and considering this means that like the sharks would actually just be flying at him, creating massive amounts of water as well, this should just put down Deidara, or at least pressure him quite a bit, with again the Shark Bomb being able to actually absorb any of the main bombs, making Kisame even stronger, which would allow him to absorb more chakra and remain at full power, when Sasori and Deidara would just be getting progressively weaker as the battle lingers. So to be honest, I think here Kisame could win in his base form. However, it would just be a one and done stomp type deal, and it really wouldn't be like that, and it would actually strain him quite a bit. Because I think these two are very good stylistically when they fight together, I guess. But I mean, if he does get seriously pressured, then he could always just fuse with Samehada and then enter the water bubble to then beat them up pretty handily. So in conclusion, Kisame does stomp this lower middle tier of the artistic duo. Now, Orochimaru, the strongest Sannin, and a foe that is just blatantly above Part 1 Kisame, with Orochimaru being so strong that in base, and albeit in his prime, is capable of combating Old Man Hiruzen, who is actually pretty crazy, with him in his prime beating up Danzo for the title of Hokage, according to the Sakura novel, as well as him actually surpassing his predecessor Tobirama, and potentially Hashirama. However, even in his old, weakened state, he is still stated to be the strongest of the 5 Kage, according to Kabuto. I mean, bro, okay, everyone's heard this, but, even then, past that, right, the fan book also states he's, the top of Konoha, and the top of Konoha is the top of all, with the Shinobi mini guide stating how he is just the peak of the Shinobi world. Yet this Hiruzen is still very unconfident in taking on Orochimaru, with both of them being nearly equals in their bout, despite both having severe mental nerfs on both sides. That's right, both, just not just Hiruzen, but I've argued that Orochimaru is under one as well many times, as he actually slices his hand to just prevent himself from crying, with him also just admitting to Sasuke in the war that he wasn't really mentally prepared to face Hiruzen, still, holding that lingering affection for his master. Yet both were stating in the fanbook to be nearly equals, with them also just being hyper-relative in terms of their kinjutsu and combat speed. So by all means, Oro was a master, and just a monster overall, which is just supported even further with the fanbook also just calling him the most evil and powerful of all the village enemies, which would include Kisame, who was opposing Kirigakure at the time, which is just likely consistent considering the talent and jutsu knack that Oro had, with Hiruzen implying that he actually had more talent than the other Sannin, along with himself, who was actually a genius, improving on the rough design of the academy that Tobirama once created, with his intelligence also just being coupled with the jutsu amount, that I mentioned earlier. Then you have like the 10-year anniversary guys stating that Oro might just have every main known jutsu. So Kisame does have his work cut out for him here. I suppose if it wasn't obvious, Orochimaru will be in his Part 1 state, and Kisame will be in his full power before he died. So, could Kisame actually win, and is he even in the caliber of Orochimaru? And to be honest, comparing them is quite difficult. However, you could actually just use Itachi to say they're both under a 3 Tomo Itachi, or close to, with Kisame in the novels mentioning how Itachi's aura could suppress his own power, and actually admits he wouldn't even stand a chance against Itachi, presumably with the EMS, depending on the translation, with Kisame also just being able to scrap with the 3 Tomo Itachi and keep up until the MS came out in the games, in which he just, yielded after the MS came out, and then in the novel continuity, of course, that we mentioned earlier. But Kisame does always still like treat Itachi as the leader, and is shown changing his demeanor when the MS does come out, with the data book also just implying that he has complete obedience to Itachi. So how does this link to Orochimaru? Well, I mean, we know that a 3-tome Itachi is what stunted on Orochimaru so hard with the basic genjutsu that he actually left the Akatsuki, with the novel for this also stating the same thing, that he had no chance. Again, depending on translations, as the novels like the Akatsuki and Gaara novels are notably bad for translating, but still, just a point. But this also just being supported when Orochimaru thinks back, stating his inferiority to Itachi, and he just has a 3-tome way silhouette in his mind at the time. And I mean, obviously, he's not a match for MS Itachi. I mean, his strongest form, got shit on. So yeah, with this, you could just say that they're in similar realms of power, with there still being a level of ambiguity between them. So take what you will. If you think Hiruzen is just objectively above the peak V2 Raikage and hence far above B, who could fight Kisame, then by all means take that. But we do know that 8 trains. And if you think Kisame is healing to 7th gate Guy without being at full power, with the chapter synopsis statement stating that Guy was putting his life on the line, is just too much for Orochimaru, then by all means, I really don't like asserting things with headcanon. So it's just more that empirically they're in a similar tier, and that's about it. The who's actually stronger is a bit more nuanced. So by all means, take what you will. I personally would lean on Kisame, and if you think he's faster than 7th gate Guy due to the median difference, if you think he's closer to 6th gate and then just above base, I'd lean towards Orochimaru. So, due to their abilities, how do they actually stack up? And I've done a video on this before. I mean, it was my second video, so don't watch it. But Orochimaru, low-key, has a very hard counter to Kisame, coupled with his already super annoying fighting style for anyone to go against. Kisame is already at a really big disadvantage, and while I don't think Orochimaru's diversity is as crucial in this fight, since, believe it or not, Kisame has 4 out of 5 nature affinities, with his water just being his strongest. So, in terms of a ninjutsu clash, I actually don't think it's a stump, but Kisame's water style would be able to add serious pressure, similar to the last match in the one prior to that, with the 1000 hungry sharks jutsu, just that he could actually just plant them on Orochimaru and then they just eat him apart. And while these probably couldn't put Orochimaru down due to his substitution jutsus and his knack for style of fighting, that allows him to just overcome stronger opponents, with the 4 tails straight up ripping him apart through the midsection when he kind of just reattaches via snakes. So this pressure could cause problems, potentially being comboed with the water shockwave to offset, Orochimaru's balance. So this gives Kisame a time to just beat him up while he's preoccupied, and we don't really know if it kills him or not, as Orochimaru does have really weird physiology being a snake and all. But the most importantly weird thing here is how Kisame typically would capitalize on this via absorption that would seriously drain Orochimaru. However, Samehada's willingness to do this is kind of questionable due to how nasty Orochimaru is described, which it creates a problem. But considering Samehada can still do things like that if it's bloodlusted, which this is, as Kisame's goal is to kill Orochimaru, so things like his potential fear due to the signing title just won't be there, and neither will this. And Kisame, or I guess Samehada, will just be forced to absorb chakra, and Kisame could just do it as well if Samehada just still refuses for whatever reason. So could Orochimaru actually clutch this back up? And to be honest, there is a good chance he does, with the Kusanagi blade being able to actually just rival Samehada and can actually act independently on its own, and have, Kisame engaging Orochimaru in taijutsu, which is just more out of Kisame's typical realm of fighting, as is for most of the 7 ninja swords. And then, whereas, Orochimaru is kind of just used to this, so by all means, I actually think Kisame will be forced to enter his fused state due to both the 2 forces of attack at will here, as well as this form just being much greater and giving him the ultimate topography advantage with the giant water bubble that actually follows Kisame's path, which is nothing to be underestimated, as he is actually demonstrably faster than even a V2 Killer B, with the Gyuki being with Gyuki even being in fear for B's life, which is it just kind of allows Kisame's absorption to be much greater, which is already already able to take 6 tails at a time. The form also just gives him the ability to instantly form blades out of his fins and arms that can penetrate the V2 and V1 cloak of B to then absorb his chakra, going straight through his skin and all. And this isn't all. I mean, even Kisame can also just simply sense chakra through his skin, which just means that Orochimaru's nasty chakra is going to be easily detected and very prevalent here. And I can't really stress enough the amp that Kisame gets physically. Bro went from being questionably relative to being base to being so much faster than a V2B that Gyuki told him, "Don't you dare use the lariat, you cannot match Kisame's speed," with Kisame also just being way faster than the full V2 cloak. So yeah, Kisame's amp is ridiculous. So in response to this, does Orochimaru use the 8-headed Hydra? And I mean, probably, as this is his only real big saving grace, as you guys know. And as you guys know, I am a really big Orochimaru guy. I've wanked him off many times, but he's not beating Fuse Kisame in base, and I'm not really sure about the Hydra either, as the Hydra is not meant for scenarios like this, like the bubble. For example, we know this form is implied to be more of a separate entity to Orochimaru that Orochimaru can just be in unison with this Hydra just being the largest and most powerful of all snake summons, including even Orochimaru. So how is it stronger? Well, we know it's physically several times larger and has more mass, but is it faster? Well, probably not. And I say this on the basis that the speed amp required for this to be a 1-for-1 increase by Orochimaru standards would just be stupidly large, and I'd feel a little dishonest to give him that speed advantage based on what happened against Itachi. So what can the Hydra actually do against Kisame's speed increases, and how does this crazy ability to just absorb chakra and sink his fins into Orochimaru when he appears and pops up? So, and to be honest, it's probably not much. And if you say the Hydra does just move around or chase him around, then it's probably just drowns, and if it doesn't, it also just drowns. Then I think Orochimaru is putting Kisame down with many different avenues of victory in terms of him being in base, because he could still use things like a potential curse mark placement to paralyze him, or a Kusanagi slash. However, if it goes to here, in this scenario I mentioned with Fuse Kisame versus Hydra Orochimaru, then I think Kisame wipes Orochimaru up via just absorbing all of his chakra and then beating him up till he drowns, or both. Now, if you couldn't guess it, this fight here is definitely the closest fight on the list. So by all means, do what you will with these interpretations. But yeah, Itachi, Uchiha, and Pain are up next, each being in their own separate tiers. But I think they could sort of just be fused together, I guess, to talk about, and just to kind of talk about their similarities and why Kisame probably just isn't that close to these two in power, and why each of these could kind of just beat him without having to waste your time with these obvious matches. And hold up. We made it this far, and you still ain't subscribed to me yet. Like, bro, you mess with the content, and I'm out here grinding for you guys, so come on now. So, I mean, for Itachi and/or Pain versus Kisame, I've never really found this match to be all that close. However, at least not so much for Itachi, but I see the idea of a full power Kisame being able to beat Pain thrown around a bit too much, with Pain being able to, beat Kisame very handily, as both him and Itachi scale to very similar places. And I know it's a large debate, on who's stronger, and which, of course, I do side with Itachi, and I have a full in-depth video on that. But for here, we know the narrative for who Pain and Itachi are. They're essentially two narrative benches set by Kishimoto to establish a few things and to separate the journey between Naruto and Sasuke, yet hold them upon the same track to keep them parallel. And this is shown with Naruto needing to combat a Rinnegan-wielding opponent, the believed leader of the Akatsuki, and the murderer of Jiraiya, not only establishing himself above the Sannin tier entirely, but above a tier who Jiraiya himself believes is above the Sannin, being his Sage Mode counterpart. Yet Pain beats him. Then his protege, Naruto, is forced to do what Jiraiya couldn't, beat Pain. Now, while Pain holding the Rinnegan doesn't seem that important, it's actually a symbolic meaning, and it's actually quite intriguing, being the representation of samsara, which means cyclic change, and Rinnegan literally means samsara, I, and this represents an outlook of the cyclic change that Naruto has to oppose, being the cycle of hatred. Naruto has to oppose this by encountering its deeper reflection for the first time in the series here against Pain, a man who built a good case for the Will of Fire being an actual evil force that's actually used to justify the murdering of children and the trampling of homes. A will that Naruto has used many times over in his life is now being corrupted, and he's fighting the deadly leader of the Akatsuki. Where in Itachi's case, it's actually the peak Mangekyo Sharingan, which is a representation of Sasuke's trauma that's needed to be overcome, the emotional distress that he's had to overcome. And I mean, I've actually considered making a 5 Kage Summit video before, but I'll sum it up, I guess, a little bit here. Essentially, Itachi is a mirror for that he beat another Sannin and has surpassed the Sannin form, being the Hydra, and Sasuke is left to do the job. And of course, Sasuke is nowhere near Itachi and Hebi and is much closer at the end of the 5 Kage Summit to the beginning of his EMS counterpart days, with, you know, Pain being very close to Sage Naruto is meant to be equals with this Sasuke. So in all honesty, you know, if you can't really say Pain and Itachi are far off, and if you do, it's kind of disingenuous. And another cool narrative that TG brought up about this whenever we were talking about this is he actually mentions how they go on to fight Obito in the war together, who has a Rinnegan and Sharingan, just kind of solidifying this. So, you know, we know that Itachi and Pain, you know, they're relative. We know that either Pain or Itachi is stated to be the strongest man in the Akatsuki, and considering I'm just building a case for either of the two being above Kisame, this just means that one of them is straight up above Kisame. And if you want more attention to that statement, then by all means, check out my Itachi versus the Akatsuki or my Itachi versus Pain, because both of those go into that very well. And we know that Itachi, and at least his MS, is just straight up above Kisame. This is shown by other Kisame yielding in their first encounter after seeing the MS, doing the same after sparring with the 3 Tomoe sick Itachi in the game, the novel stating Itachi's aura almost surpasses his own power and suppresses it entirely, Kisame also admitting he doesn't stand a chance in that novel, or even just the data book stating how Kisame holds complete obedience to Itachi, indicating the difference in ability. I mean, I don't have to say it. Their abilities are better than Kisame. Like Nagato, if you go bar for bar, he can just absorb more chakra from B than Kisame actually can. And we know things like Chibaku Tensei and Shinra Tensei are just hard counters for Kisame, and the Totsuka Blade and Yadamir and Amaterasu being no exception either. So by all means, Kisame isn't really beating Itachi or Pain, and it's probably not that close either. And I didn't really want to waste your time going into here's an avenue that he could win from, as that's kind of disingenuous. So yeah, that's the video. If you guys did enjoy, please consider subscribing or liking the video, or just checking out my previous rendition of this gauntlet where I placed Itachi in this position. I had him run the gauntlet where I go into more of these arguments, as, you know, I do believe this video, or that, you know, the other one as well, serve very well as follow-up videos. So by all means, you know, watch that one after this, or if you've already watched that one, then I hope you enjoyed this one. But with that, have a nice day, and God bless, and as always, love you guys.